January 17th, 2024. And I just want to acknowledge, if my screen will stop popping up stuff in front of people's faces, and Town Councilor Deb Poland. That's all that I see right now. We also have Dwayne Martin, Director of Community Development, and Greg Summers, Town Engineer. And I'm going to let Rick do the rest of the introductions. Things keep moving around on my screen right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Also with us this morning is John Phillips, Director of Public Works, Lauren DeLisa Siegel, who's part of our economic development team. And then we have our consultants from FHI and Tools. So we have Parker, Adam, and Shauna, who, if you were to ask anyone on our team, I think for us, they feel like part of the team and part of West Hartford. So working very closely with them over the last year on this very important project, which we're excited about. Presenting today to the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee. If it's okay with you, I can jump right into it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So as we know, we've been working on the Vision Zero action plan for the better part of a year now. Almost, within a week of last year, January 10th of 2023, the mayor presented a resolution and the council adopted a Vision Zero initiative resolution. And part of that resolution created a Vision Zero task force whose goal was to create an action plan that will achieve 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries as a result of traffic crashes within 10 years. So for us, that would be 2033. And this is a result of, as we all know, 2022 was one of our most deadliest years on our streets, in the streets of West Hartford. And that was following a number of years where we had seen an uptick in crashes, serious crashes, and some going back in time, resulting in deaths as well. So in February of 23, we officially formed our task force. This task force was comprised of 10 residents and 8 staff members. And this task force met in February and March. And at that point, we were also in the process of issuing an RFP to hire a consultant to assist the task force with the development of our action plan. So in April and May, we engaged a contract with both FHI and Tool Design, and they unofficially joined us in the spring, and then I think hit the ground running by May. So our task force, along with our consultants, met every single month through the year of 2023. In addition, as we moved into the summer, as things really started to take hold and we were really getting into the nuts and bolts of creating the action plan, we had created 4 different subcommittees where our task force members were part of each of those 4 subcommittees, and those subcommittees met almost weekly through the summer. As we headed into the fall, we held our first public meeting in September. And then we held an additional public meeting in December as well. And we also issued a survey to the residents of West Hartford. As part of that survey, we did have an interactive map, which I know all of the council had an opportunity to see and opine on, as did many of our residents, which we'll talk about later as well. So, and this interactive map helped to identify areas of town that needed improvement and from a safety standpoint. At our meeting in December, which many of our council folks were there, and if we're not there, we're able to view that meeting that was streamed, and we presented a draft of our action plan. So that was the first opportunity for our public to actually see and hold the action plan. And At that point, we wanted to hear from the public. We wanted to hear what they thought of the action plan. Where are the areas of improvement? What is good about the action plan? What do we need to improve with the action plan? And we received feedback, critical feedback, which is what we wanted. We knew as we were developing and issuing that the draft of the action plan, we knew that there were, it was a very important part of the process in seeking that public input and incorporating that public input into the plan. We received about 50 comments on that draft of the action plan. And I'd say probably the most critical part of that action plan was the need for the first needed to understand what those quick build projects were going to be. What were we going to be able to do and implement as quickly as possible to start the road towards creating a more safer environment here in West Hartford. And over the last few weeks, we've been working internally and with our consultants on developing a list of projects that we are committed to completing within the first 12 months of Vision Zero, and that so that we would be completing these projects within the year of 2024. And that list is comprised of about 70 plus projects. Some of them are, what we would consider quick build, smaller projects that we can implement quick. And then some of them will take a little bit more time, but we are committed as a staff, and I know the council is committed as well to ensuring that we complete those projects during those first 12 months. So we are nearing the end of the finalization of our action plan. So we met with our task force last week. At that point, we were still finalizing the action plan. So we delivered that action plan to the task force on Friday, as well as posted it online for view as well. So today we will present the draft of that final action plan. And we would like the council to have some time with this as well and sink their teeth into the action plan. And then we would, from here, set up another meeting with our CPED committee and sometime over the next few weeks and receive that feedback. Certainly, we'd be welcome to hearing that feedback in the interim and then incorporating as much of that change into the action plan as possible. Then we will work with Corporation Council to formally adopt that plan. So we have, we've done a lot of work. This task force has worked incredibly hard over the last 12 months. At the time we adopted the resolution back in January, we were the second town or city in the state to adopt a Vision Zero initiative. I believe we're still one of two that are, but we are very hopeful at this point that many in the state will follow this lead. CROG was a very active attendee in all of our monthly meetings, so we will work closely with CROG once we've adopted our final plan and work with area communities to educate folks on Vision Zero and hopefully see this trend continue throughout the state. We will, this plan has already helped us secure grant funds to implement some of the changes that we need to do with our action plan. It was very influential and critical in terms of securing our Safe Streets for All grant that we received back in the fall, which will allow us to implement a speed enforcement camera pilot program. So that fits in nicely with our Vision Zero action plan. And once we have our adopted plan, that plan is going to help us secure additional grant funding during the first year and each successor year. There's another Safe Streets for All application due in February, and we would love this plan to be part of that application process so that we can secure additional funding as we move through the next year. So I'll have some time at the end as well to thank our task force for all of their hard work throughout the year. And as I said, our FHI and Tool have been very much a part of our team. We wouldn't be where we are today without the hard work of our consultants as well. And this is something we can be proud of. But I say that because it's also difficult. You know, as we've worked hard over the last year, we still saw, you know, accidents, serious accidents throughout town. And, you know, we had a year of we talked about 2022 being one of our deadliest years, 2023. We did not have anyone die on our streets, but as the calendar flipped and we turned to 2024, we had a resident and pedestrian who was struck by a car on Albany Avenue and died as a result of that crash. And our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to the Goldfarb family. But those are the types of things that have been weighing on the minds of our task force, and I know our residents as well, as we move through this process. So we are confident that we have a plan to move us forward, to create a safe environment here in West Hartford. And there's a lot that we'll talk through over the next 45 minutes or so that'll highlight how we will get there. But I, again, appreciate everyone's time and commitment to this process. And then certainly looking forward to working with our council during this meeting, as well as an upcoming CPED meeting. So through you, Madam Chair, I will stop and turn it over to Parker Sorensen from FHI, who will begin our presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rick. I'm all set to share at this time. Before I get going, if you could just give me a thumbs up or just confirm you can see the screen. Thank you very much.
You look good.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick, for the introduction, and thank you to the group for having us this morning. We're really happy to join you today and really kind of highlight and summarize all the hard work not only the consultant team has completed, but as well as the resident members of the task force and town staff. So really thank you today. So as Rick mentioned, over the 45 minutes, I think we can certainly spend way more time than that. So we wanted to really highlight in a quick summary presentation here, not only the action plan you'll see as the fourth bullet, but really the process that got us here, from kind of the introduction of Vision Zero, and make sure we're all on the same page with the definition of Vision Zero, some of the planning efforts, not only with the task force and but also the community and the public process that we underwent with this study. And then kind of wrap up with Rick kind of highlighted and previewed some of the next steps where we're headed with this action plan, and really dive into some of the details as we wrap up. So as Rick mentioned, it's really a collaborative effort among 4 parties. We had, of course, town staff from West Hartford, but staff from the consultant team. I'm from FHI Studio and Tool Design as well. So 2 consultants on board for this process, and the Vision Zero task force. So kind of amongst these 4 parties, we were meeting regularly, bi-weekly, monthly throughout the process. As I mentioned, my name is Parker Sorensen. I am the project manager for the study, but I was also very involved in the safety assessment, diving into the crash data in partnership with the staff at Tool. I'm joined today by Adam Teska, who was leading up the action plan development and the actual document. So you'll hear from him today. He's online, and Shauna Kitzman from Tool Design, who led up the community engagement. So thank you for joining us today as well. So really briefly, want to back up and just kind of make sure we're on the same page with Vision Zero, kind of what led us here as we embarked on the process. Quite simply, Vision Zero is all about a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries, or Vision for Zero fatalities and zero serious injuries on our streets, but also increasing safe healthy, and equitable mobility for all. Yeah, I'm actually a West Hartford resident myself, so even before being brought on board, I just as a resident member of the community experienced some of the events of 2022. And I think we all know kind of 2022 was a really hard year for all of us. And, you know, we certainly know that that's kind of what brought us here and prefaced much of the work that we had at the task force and the consultant team. You know, the headline on the left that stood out, you know, the 5 motor vehicle deaths in a week in December of 2022, really striking. And I think that's something we really felt as members of the community, certainly. But, you know, certainly Vision Zero has been kind of a topic as well at the state. In 2023, the state of Connecticut passed the Vision Zero bill, which among other things allowed for some additional enforcement and designations that are part of the action plan. And then the trend is also kind of mirrored at the national level as well, specifically with pedestrian deaths rising to their highest level in 40 years also in 2023. So something that we're seeing at the local level is certainly mirrored at the state and federal level as well. One of our early findings when we took a look at the crash data and the traffic fatalities, we plotted from 2018 how have traffic fatalities changed in West Hartford in relation to the 2018 number. Upwards of 250% increase since 2018. And just as a comparison, Connecticut statewide data is provided here in dark blue. Saw some increases, but nothing as drastic as we've seen locally in town. So really reiterating what we felt and what we've kind of been hearing in the media was really reflected as well in the crash data for the last several years. And finally, as Rick mentioned, this has really been a very fast process since, well, the consultants were on board in May and June of last year. So kind of highlighted in this yellow box, that's kind of when the work on the plan that you see before you today really began in earnest. With the action plan, we had an incredible amount of meetings with the task force. It was a really collaborative effort between the project team, with the consultants, the town staff, and the task force meeting on a regular basis. And as Rick mentioned, we did have 2 public meetings in here in September, where we really focused on some of the preliminary crash analysis that we completed, identifying the high injury network, the Vision Zero safety focus areas, and rolled out the community survey and interactive map. Following that first public meeting, coming back in December with a draft action plan for review and kind of summarizing everything that we've heard up until that point. So lots of work to get to where we are today, and look forward to getting this thing adopted and finalized and underway. With that, I will turn it over to Shauna. Thank you.
Thanks, Parker. If you don't mind just continuing to flip the slides as we go. Good morning. I'm going to review the community engagement elements of this plan, along with a couple of other activities that we conducted to contribute to the action plan. A big part of this process has been the task force, and the task force works as an advisory body. The task force was primarily selected by the mayor at the beginning of the year, representing a variety of specialists and advocacy groups related to roadway safety. And when we came on board, we took a closer look at the composition of this group. Now, because roadway violence disproportionately impacts people of color, as well as younger and older folks, we wanted to make sure we had those perspectives represented on our task force. And we worked closely with Adrian Billings-Smith to appoint several additional members to our task force. And they were instrumental to our process. Next slide, please. Thanks. So a successful Vision Zero action plan must be based on both data and community engagement. So our public engagement efforts focused on soliciting input from a community survey, which Rick mentioned earlier, as well as a digital web map, which I will review both in a moment. But early in our process, I wanted to also note that we developed a scope amendment to enhance the accessibility of both our work products and our process. So I'll just quickly go over these elements that were made up the public engagement suite that we did. So in addition to the survey and the web map, we held 9 task force meetings as well as several smaller group meetings. We managed a Vision Zero inbox and comment log, responding to folks within a couple of days of their inquiry. We also managed a project webpage on the town website, which included a downloadable frequently asked questions document. There was a good amount of community media coverage, and we held those 2 public meetings that Rick mentioned. Next slide. So the public survey we issued in several languages. In addition to English, we had it in Spanish, Chinese, and Portuguese. We had this public survey. We asked folks how they are getting around town and what their perceptions are regarding roadway safety in general. These were available through the project webpage and at all of our community libraries. So most of the folks identify as middle-aged adults, but we were happy to see a good amount of seniors who responded, as well as about 12% of younger adults and even some students. It may come as no surprise that a lot of people drive all or most of the time, but we also have a really high representation of people walking, and another good contingent of people who bike, scooter, or skate. So all of these people are considered in the Vision Zero action plan. I think a misconception that crops up kind of frequently is that this is just a plan for bicyclists or just a plan for people walking, but in fact, it is agnostic to mode. It's really just about creating a safe roadway network for all people. When we asked the people what their primary concerns were with safety in town, speeding crops up again and again. Obviously, speed is a major contributing factor, if not the primary contributing factor to roadway incidents. People are also concerned about distracted and reckless driving, as well as non-compliant and unlawful driving. I will say our public survey received about 780 responses. Now, the web maps survey was slightly more popular than the community survey. We received almost 1,800 comments. I'm not sure if any of you took the time to look at this map or contribute your own thoughts, but folks were allowed to drop a pin in any roadway or intersection of concern and identify in a comment field what their concerns were and what their ideas for safety improvements might be. So this was really a geographic-based way to collect information from the community. People were also allowed to like or upvote. As you can see in the little pop-up, there's a little yellow thumbs up. And that was a really popular exercise, and I think people really had fun with it. Anyone who opened this web map at the end of the process, it was almost impossible to see any blank map left. So the key takeaway from this is that we identified about 15 distinct themes. Parker, next slide, please. And we analyzed the core themes related to keywords that people used in their comments. Most of the comments fell within 1, if not 2 or 3 comments. And this here is a really long list, and relates to concepts from people concerned about their families' access to our public schools, visibility and lighting, safety at intersections, as well as enforcement and transit. So it really runs the gamut. But I want to highlight the top 3 themes that received the most comments or likes, and those relate to design of our roadways, intersections, and signals, as well as speed. You'll see speed again and again, and people's perception of safety when walking and or crossing our intersections. Next slide, please. Another element of our planning process was the road safety audit, or RSA, of Park Road, which Parker led. And the goal of an RSA is to identify safety issues formally and provide potential enhancements to improve safety, which in turn helps the responsible agencies or departments make proposed enhancements. And the RSA brought together the engineering team, select people from the task force, town staff, and some key stakeholders along Park Road to address the challenges and potential engineering solutions on this critical corridor. Next slide. As Rick also mentioned, we were happy to support the town in pursuing an SS4A grant. As you may be aware, there is a substantial amount of federal funding available now to address roadway safety. West Hartford does have its issues, but you're not alone. Many communities are dealing with similar concerns, and the federal government is recognizing this and putting money behind planning, demonstration projects, or implementation projects to improve our safe roads. So the town won the grant. It was one of the largest demonstration grants in the state of Connecticut for this annual round. And Dwayne and his team is working through the internal and external process of implementing the program. But this will include fixed speed cameras at about 15 locations throughout town, as well as a new ordinance and support for staff on the planning and or engineering side and police to manage this program. Next slide. So we had a very great turnout at our December 6th public meeting. I recognize some of your faces from that event. We held this at the Noah Webster Library, and this was developed as it was sort of a workshop, open house format with a formal presentation in the middle, followed by more just project staff available, town staff available at the end to talk to people, answer their questions. So what did we hear? We heard a lot about specific feedback on roadways. People definitely come to these meetings with concerns, I think often about their own roadways or areas around perhaps their kids' school or areas where they shop. In terms of feedback to the planning process, we hear mixed reviews. We're going too fast, we're not going fast enough. So we heard both sides of that. And then there was some voiced concern for the strength and viability of the action plan. People want to make sure that this plan has teeth and that they can hold the town accountable for the changes that we commit to making. I would say one of the biggest takeaways from the meeting is that we advertised that the draft action plan was open for public comment. We kept that open and available on the project website for 2 weeks. And as Rick mentioned, we received about 50 comments. Next slide, please. And those comments came in either through comment forms at the action plan or emails to the Vision Zero inbox, which we fielded and responded to each one individually. It may come as no surprise, but people in West Hartford are very actively engaged and they are passionate about safety. This is a matter of life and death. So people are, it can be somewhat emotional when people talk about this, and people are excited to see change. There's both excitement and support with some frustration about how long some of the action plans might take. I think there's a perception that the town can move into action and change our roadways really quickly, when in fact that's often not the case, and there's planning that needs to be done beforehand. There's often elements of public engagement that need to happen before the town can make any changes to our infrastructure. There's acknowledgement about funding and staff resource constraints that might hinder the plan. And then last but not least, there is a call for ongoing transparent communication between the town departments and the community. Next slide. I'm going to pass it over to Adam. Thank you.
Somebody had to do it. I didn't unmute myself. Thank you so much, Shauna, for presenting this. So we can go to the next slide. I'm going to walk a little bit through the sort of Vision Zero method and why it's so important that West Hartford undertook this process that we're now concluding. So, the way to think about this process may be helpful to think about it as a juxtaposition against sort of conventional approach or way things have traditionally happened and a Vision Zero approach. And the first difference is sort of an approach or way of thinking about how you deal with serious injuries and deaths. Under a conventional approach, traffic deaths are inevitable. That you really focus on preventing collisions, all types of crashes. We assume that there's sort of perfect human behavior, everybody's going to follow the rules, and we really put a lot of responsibility on individual actors, whether they're drivers, pedestrians, or bicyclists. In a Vision Zero approach, we sort of flip the script and we see traffic deaths as preventable. We really focus on fatal and serious crashes. We integrate the idea that human error is part of life and that we are not all perfect and we need to design roadways accordingly. And it takes a systems approach. It really sees the importance of the roadway as something that is everybody's responsibility, not just individual actors on the roadway. Next slide. There's also a different approach to how you go about solving problems. So in a conventional approach, typically the solutions are design-only solutions. You go out and you try to fix the roadway. In a Vision Zero approach, as we'll talk about, it's a more holistic solution. So talk about policy and culture and data, as well as design. Under a conventional approach, typically the loudest and most powerful voices get the most attention. And I think this is something that's really important to understand about how this process works. In a Vision Zero approach, you really follow the data. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. It doesn't just mean crash data, it also means public input. But it means that you can really focus on the areas where you're going to have the biggest impact. But in order to get there, you have to do some analysis. And if you don't go through that process and sort of the process that we're going through now, often what happens is you start fixing places where people are the loudest and the most powerful people want to see changes. And traditionally, that has not resulted in a reduction or elimination of fatalities and serious injuries. The conventional approach is typically ad hoc, so you're sort of running around chasing your tail, trying to solve the last problem, whereas a Vision Zero approach is prioritized and systematic. And under a conventional approach, there's not a lot of accountability because you haven't set a baseline understanding of where you're at and where you need to go. And so it becomes very difficult for both communities, as in sort of local representative government, to measure their success, but also for residents and stakeholders to hold their communities accountable by understanding, where the progress is made or where it hasn't been made. So I'm going to walk through some of these elements and talk about how this Vision Zero plan meets these goals. If we go go forward. So when it comes to holistic solutions, as all of you have seen in the Vision Zero plan, we've really focused on practices and policies, cultures, safe design, and data. These are different areas where if you make improvements, communities have shown and other communities have demonstrated that it leads to reduction and elimination in serious deaths and injuries. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things you'll notice here is we're not just talking about the design of roadways. We're not just going out and trying to fix roadways. We're talking about the culture, how people go about using the roadways. It's about the information that you're collecting so that you can be responsive, so that you can understand what's actually going on out there. And it's also about sort of changing the way that you go about the practices and policies of constructing and designing roadways. It's also data driven, and this is something that I think is really important. 56% of all fatalities and serious injuries occur on 9% of roadways. And this really gets to this prioritization framework. You know, I think there are a lot of people who would look at the other 91% of the roadways in West Hartford and might have some thoughts about how they could be safer, about how they may be nicer streets or more enjoyable locations to be, places where they'd like to spend more time. But a Vision Zero approach really recognizes that the main goal here is reducing and eliminating serious injuries and deaths. And in order to do that, we really need to focus on the highest priority areas, places where we know those things are occurring. And that's really only on about 9% of the roadways, right? That's where we can have the biggest impact. So if we go forward. But we also recognize that data isn't everything. We don't have perfect data. We don't have all of the information as much as we'd like that. And that's something that this plan looks at building and growing. And it's not something unique to West Hartford. So we've included a sort of local road analysis and a high injury network, which is, again, sort of data driven. But we've also looked at transportation equity zones. And there's a recognition and a lot of support or a lot of data out there that says that lower income communities, communities of color, sort of disadvantaged communities disproportionately suffer the consequences of roadway fatalities and serious injuries, and that they are frequently overlooked in the process of improving roadways. And so we've incorporated that analysis into this, as well as all of the community's input. We recognize that, you know, people of West Hartford walk on the streets, they go out there, and we've asked you, where are the dangerous places? Where are the places that need to be improved? And we've combined all of those data points, that would be all of that information, into a prioritization network. So if we go forward. And what you'll see in the plan and discussed here are sort of 4 tiers of roadways. They're the most urgent roadways. So these are areas that essentially meet all the criteria. The data shows that they're dangerous. Public feedback has shown that they're dangerous, and they are also in transportation equity zones. As you move down the priority framework, some of those things drop off. We're really data focused, so through the high and medium priorities, we're always looking at areas where the data is showing that there's serious injuries and fatalities. But in the high area, maybe it's in a transportation equity zone, or it's also a place where there's lots of community input that's saying that it is an issue. And it sort of goes on and discussed in more detail in the actual plan to see that. But this really means that, for the near future, there's about 7.6 miles of roadway and a few communities in West Hartford where the town can really effectively and efficiently use its resources to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. There's also in this plan accountable solutions. So one of the things that you'll see in the tables is there's sort of upfront some core elements that talk about the background, the goals, the strategies, and the actions for each of those major categories. But there's also a lot of action details, talking about which actions have the highest priority, what's the time frame for implementing them, who are the lead partners and supporting partners, how frequently the action should occur, what are the specific performance metrics for that action. This all makes a strategy for improving the roadways much more accountable. And again, if we compare this to a sort of traditional approach where maybe a municipality is just putting together a couple of ad hoc solutions, there's no real way to determine whether or not it's achieving those goals, if it's doing what it set out to do. And one of the things that I really want to talk about is this RSA, or the road safety audits, which are a real focal point of the design solutions that we put forward in this action plan. And when we, sat down with the task force was amazing. They came to us with so many ideas, and these are just some examples of things that they felt like needed to happen on roadways in West Hartford in order to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries, whether it was reducing travel lane widths or making bus and transit more accessible, creating new bicycle facilities, improving existing bicycle facilities. And as we sat and started to think about, all of this work, one of the things that we had to acknowledge is that on a town-wide basis, sort of studying, planning, and implementing all these solutions was not feasible within an acceptable time frame. And what that means is that it was not acceptable to continue to accept serious injuries and fatalities as you sort of individually move through each one of these issues within the community. And, that is a sort of traditional approach. You'll have a sidewalk network expansion program. You'll have a bike network expansion program. You'll have a crosswalk enhancement program. And the problem with that is that you're, one, working not on a prioritized network, and two, you're sort of dealing with each one of these issues individually. And so what we have proposed in this plan and think is the most efficient and effective use of resources is on the next slide, which is to take RSAs as the focus. So that means going through the prioritized network and going out and doing those RSAs that Shauna talked about. And that allows for a holistic study of all the conditions on those really critical roadway segments. And you'll see in the plan a list of all of the things that, typically are involved or are recommended to be involved in an RSA. And it's incredibly extensive. It allows you as a community to involve community members and users in the evaluation and development of recommendations for those roadway segments, which is a really critical part of moving things forward, because, we've all had issues where, a safety improvement has been proposed and there's community pushback or feedback. And sometimes that happens because community members aren't involved in the design process from the beginning. It allows you to prioritize recommendations because you're looking at things holistically. So you can talk about bundling different recommendations and talking about improvements that may be not initially connected, but maybe need to be thought about connected as a connected approach. And maybe most critically, the RSAs really aligns with sort of federal and state approaches for funding. And one of the things that it's going to be important to recognize is that West Hartford is not going to be able to fund all of the improvements to the roadway itself. These safety solutions are going to require the support of outside entities. And so setting up your process in order to be very competitive for that grant funding is really an important part of creating a safe roadway network. So the result of all of this is accountable outcomes. So there are general performance measures in the plan. So we've talked about the number of fatal and serious injury crashes and the percentage of Vision Zero focus areas that are improved. But there are also specific performance measures on each action item. There's also a data dashboard that's being developed that's going to be annually updated with crash information. It'll identify recently completed projects and planned projects and include the yearly review and plan updates. Again, this really changes the accountability framework from something that's more ad hoc to something that really sees improving the roadways and addressing these safety issues as a continuous long-term project that needs sustained effort. So in the end, what West Hartford is going to get out of this process is an action plan with a holistic strategy with real proven approaches to serious injuries and fatalities around policy, design, culture, and data. There are SMART actions. Those are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound actions. These are actions that are proven to be effective ways of moving processes forward. You have a prioritized network so that you can use your resources in the most efficient way possible to deal with serious injuries and fatalities. And that prioritized network includes data, a vast amount of public input, and a strong equity analysis. There is a institutionalized collaboration and accountability process. The task force is there, it's in place, it's ready to be sort of mobilized to support all of these efforts. And the town has really set itself up to be accountable to itself and its residents by publishing yearly reports to identify progress. And finally, there are a set of proven countermeasures to support implementation. This is not something that I have delved into a lot here, but if you look into the sort of implementation section of the action plan, you'll see we have identified a number of strategies for intervening in the roadway that have been proven to address kind of core issues identified by the task force. So in a lot of ways, you are set up for success to move forward on all of this. I think, you know, if it's not clear here, I just want to make sure that everybody here understands that we hear loud and clear that when there's a serious injury or a fatality on a roadway network, while an action plan is being developed, it can feel incredibly disheartening. You're putting in all of this work to make progress along an issue that everybody in the community really clearly cares about. And there can be a feeling here like, what are we doing? Right? Why haven't we made any progress along the way? And I hope my presentation today has really emphasized that you have made a lot of progress, that you are set up right now for implementation in a way that is going to make it much faster, much easier, and much more efficient for you to start making these improvements. And that over the course of the next several years, you are going to, make progress on these key issues. And I'm going to hand it over to the town to talk a little bit about sort of what the first year of implementation of this plan starts to look like.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Dwayne Martin, Director of Community Development. So I'm going to discuss next steps that the town has planned to carry this forward. Next slide, please. So obviously we have refined the draft final action plan. We have posted that on the town's webpage. We are making it available to the public to review and provide comments. We want to collect those comments by January 26th, and then we'll reconvene as a group to update, respond to the comments, and go forward with finalizing the plan, which we hope to have completed in early February. We also, as was mentioned earlier, will come back to this committee and give an update, answer any remaining questions. And then we want to go forward with implementing the action plan starting this year and going until 2033 and beyond. Next slide, please. So the next two slides give an update on projects that we believe the engineering division can complete in 2024. So I'm going to walk through these. As was mentioned earlier, there's 72 individual projects, and the next two slides group them together into categories. In summary, they're focused on categories that came out of the action plan related to traffic safety, speeding, pedestrian issues, bicyclist issues, or some combination of those. Excuse me. So the first one listed there is a crash response team. This came out of the action plan to more formally address when severe injury crashes or fatal crashes occur, to not work individually on a remedy or means to prevent these from occurring. So we want to create a team that will get together with each of these occurrences and review the crash and come up with ways to try to prevent them from happening again. Some of these may be simple depending on the occurrence, and some may be more complicated, maybe related to some of the items that are listed on the screen beyond the first one. So we are meeting this week to initiate this crash response team. Right now, it seems like for most of these, it'll be a combination of police, fire, public works, engineering, and public relations, but there may be more or less depending on the crash itself. So we're meeting this week to review and discuss the crash that occurred earlier this month on Albany Avenue near Vanderveer. The second one is the grant that the town is going to receive, Initiate Speed Enforcement Cameras. We don't know exactly where those are going to be located. That's something that will have to be worked out as this project moves forward. I did receive contact from Federal Highways with regards to this grant. There's going to be another training session and then a kickoff meeting, which has not been scheduled, but it sounds like it'll be later this month or into February to initiate that project. So more to come. We wanted to list this maybe a little bit optimistic now that we've received the state's guidance. There's a lot of work, a lot of effort that the town needs to put forth to get this off the ground, but we're hoping to have the cameras deployed this year. We'll see how we proceed through this process. The next one is accessible pedestrian signals. So this is really a benefit focused on pedestrians. The town of West Hartford has around 60 traffic signals throughout town. The state has more beyond that. And through many years and projects, we've been doing what we call accessible pedestrian signal improvements. These are really the equipment that's out there, the push buttons, the pedestrian signal heads. There's audible tones and messages to assist pedestrians in understanding where the buttons are, where to look to safely cross, and also assists if you are blind or visually impaired. So we have 10 locations that we are planning on getting upgraded this year. Review and improve lighting at crosswalks. So we're focusing on Albany Ave. I should mention most of the projects on these two slides are related to the high injury network, but there are some that spread out beyond that. So Albany Avenue from Sims to Prospect, we want to take a look at the crosswalk areas as far as the street lighting is concerned and make upgrades or changes as needed. Rectangular rapid flashing beacons. We have some of these in town. We want to continue to expand this program. So we have identified 11 locations where we want to install these, what we call RRFBs. These are really an enhancement. These are flashing lights when you push the button to make motorists aware that there's a pedestrian preparing or crossing at that location. Reflective pavement markings, or retro-reflective pavement markings, excuse me. So there's 5 roadway segments that we've identified to improve the pavement markings. The next one is similar wider edge lines. We have 8 roadway segments for that. Speed feedback signage on the high injury network. So we use these, I call them driver feedback signs, but it displays the speed of the motorist to try and encourage them to slow down, be cognizant of the speed limit, and drive safer. So we spread these all over town, mostly by request of residents, but we want to focus our efforts on the high injury network. So we've generated 10 locations we want to relocate them to in 2024. Improve sightlines at intersections. So this could be a combination of vegetation or parking. So we want to look at the sightlines at 5 roadway segments and see what we can do to improve those sightlines for motorist, pedestrian, bicyclist safety. The last one on this slide is to look at and install bike lanes on Boulevard from South Main to Mountain. This is something that came up this past year. Next slide. to do a road safety audit on Albany Ave. This is something that was talked about and performed on Park Road. We want to try and get at least one road safety audit done a year, if not more. There's also potential for grant opportunities. A lot of the high injury network has state highways on them, which are challenging to do measures to slow down motorists and do other improvements. So we're going to look to be partnering with the Connecticut Department of Transportation on Albany Ave for this road safety audit. Dynamic no turn on red signage. So we heard this a lot from pedestrians, that motorists either do not see the pedestrian or pay attention or come to a complete stop or stop at the right location. And so they're asking to eliminate no turn on reds at signalized intersections. That seems like a slam dunk. Why not do it everywhere? There are challenges that can come from eliminating no turn on red, whether it's environmental or cut through in a neighborhood. But we don't want to ignore the possibility of improving safety. So we have identified 4 locations to install dynamic no turn on red signage. So the idea behind this is the sign is blank until somebody pushes the button to cross using one of the crosswalks, and then this sign would display no turn on red. So it's sort of a variable sign depending on the conditions. Also, having it light up or be blank gets more attention to it. So it's something that other locations in the state have started to use. So we've identified 4 locations in town that we would like to deploy them. Raised crosswalks on Boulevard and Fern Street. We want to take a look at these 2 roads and install raised crosswalks where we can slow traffic down, maybe combine them with heavily used crossing locations. So we haven't identified specific intersections just yet, but we're going to review those 2 streets and look to install raised crosswalks. Centerline rumble strips on Bloomfield Avenue. This is something that can help keep motorists in their travel lane as a safety improvement, so they don't cross over and collide with an oncoming vehicle. So we'll work with the state on that as well. Flashing stop signs, specifically at Boulevard and Wardwell. This is just an enhancement to get the motorist's attention to the need to stop or stop more appropriately to avoid those rolling stops. Curve warning signage, various locations. This is a state project that's occurring in town, but we wanted to add it onto the list because it is a safety benefit that can help. We want to install a brand new crosswalk on Raymond Road at Dinah Road. This is a popular location for people to cross Raymond Road to gain access or to exit Whole Foods. We've had this complaint for quite some time. There are nearby crosswalks, but we feel as though there's a benefit to adding this onto the roadway network to improve pedestrian safety at that location. Signing and pavement marking upgrades. So we want to look at the unsignalized state road intersections. This is another project that the state DOT is doing throughout town. Again, wanted to put that onto the list. And then the last one is traffic signal backplates for town traffic signals on the high injury network. Some of our traffic signals have what are called backplates. So it's essentially a shield that goes around the signal face display. It helps with sun glare so that you're not having a difficult time seeing the traffic signal indication, but they become more popular and widespread and have reflective strips on them. So in addition to the benefit of reduced sun glare, it also makes it easier for a motorist to locate and identify the traffic signals that are for them. We've received a lot of positive feedback from older motorists with regards to the usage of these backplates. They're becoming more recommended in all locations. And with that, I will hand it off to Mr. Ledwith for closing comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. One thing that we didn't mention in the presentation that I wanted the council to understand as well, you know, we talked about the Vision Zero task force, who's been, you know, I can't overstate enough how instrumental they've been in compiling and working throughout the year to initiate our action plan and develop our action plan. But we will also be forming, by the end of this month, by the end of January, forming a Vision Zero advisory committee who will work with staff to ensure that we do what we say we're going to do, essentially. So we'll meet for the first time in February, just after the finalization of this plan. We will set goals for the year, most of which have been, would include the projects that were just highlighted by Dwayne. And we would meet quarterly throughout the year to provide progress on our goal of achieving Vision Zero. So, and then at the end of the year, we'd be responsible for developing a Vision Zero annual report, which would be presented back to the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee. So that will continue as we move through this first year. I think the other important point I'd want to make is that this is, this is a document that we're looking to finalize, in the coming weeks, but it's not a document that's not going to change. This isn't something that is set in stone that we will work with and doesn't change over the course of the next 10 years. It's a living, breathing document, as we've referred to it in the past. It will change. We will learn. We will grow. And what we engage, with the public and learn from the state and our consultants and other communities, and we will incorporate change as we need to into this document, and certainly keep CPED aware and updated in terms of those changes as they occur throughout the year. So, and again, just want to quickly thank our task force, Dwayne Martin, Greg Summer, Assistant Chief Tara, Renee McHugh, Adrian Billing-Smith, Eric Dempsey, our residents, Ed Pollock, Aaron Connolly, Tom Condon, Sandy Castione, Mary Donegan, Maxine Nugent. We had 2 students on the task force as well, one from Conard and one from Hall, Amalia Seidman and Ariane Grover, and Jay Stange as well. So we are where we are today because of this hard work, and I know that was a lot to digest over the last hour for our committee, but we will pause there and turn back to you, Madam Chair, to receive any initial feedback, comments, and questions on the plan, knowing that we will have another meeting set up as well over the coming weeks to finalize that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, FHI and Tool, Adam, Shauna, and Parker for your assistance this morning. And I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Tiffany, you're on mute. There you are. Nope.
I unmuted myself and then okay. Did anybody hear anything I said?
No.
Okay. I said thank you so much for the presentation. Obviously, this is a huge task, and the work that's been done so far, is great. And I know that I'm ready to dig in and get to work going through this. As Rick said, CPED will have another meeting after we've had time to go through it where we can ask more detailed questions. But do any committee members have any comments, feedback, questions right now? No? Okay. Do any other town council members have? Mayor Cantor.
Thank you. I just also want to thank the task force and staff, Rick, you, because you thanked everybody, and our consultants. This is, and I want to frame this as saying nobody wants this implementation done more than the elected officials on this meeting. And I think there's, when we first established Vision Zero, I wanted things done tomorrow. But there is a difference in the way we have to approach this problem. It is systemic. There's lots of pieces to it. We don't control all our roads. We have to provide the data to not only our residents, but also to the state and federal to get funding to help us. I mean, there's a big picture. So this year has been a platform for us to then actually make the implementation process and have an ongoing plan to go forward. And I understand, as was mentioned, this is life and death. This is passionate. We are all emotional and driven by wanting to make our community better. And so I understand that there has been some frustration from residents that they haven't seen more change, but I just want to thank everybody. I actually just read in the New York Times Magazine this weekend, and this was the cover, and it talks about the deaths federally on state roads, and this is a problem around, and the level of distracted driving, the level of aggressive driving, the level of speeding, and so there's a lot to unpack, and our federal transportation, Pete Buttigieg, was saying that sometimes things get worse before they get better, because you actually bring people to the roads in alternative ways, whether those be pedestrians and bicyclists, and then people learn how to behave, and we all behave off each other. If people are speeding, we're going to speed. If people are doing distracted driving, we might also do that. If people are angry drivers, it actually whether it's proven data that people get more angry too. So there is this very big, locally, statewide, federally, how we need to change behavior on all different levels. So I, again, want to thank everybody, understand that we get the urgency of this. I think this is the right framework for us to accomplish what we need to accomplish. Not to say that we're not going to, again, make improvements all the time, but in just urging, we're going to have to just make sure that we individually also spread the word, talk to our community members, and have them try to understand this process as well. So, and thank you all.
Does anyone else have any comments, feedback, questions? Okay. Rick, do we want to move on to the affordable housing plan?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Adam, Shauna, and Parker, for all of your work and for joining us this morning. And we'll talk very soon. Take care.
Thank you all.
So, thank you, everyone. I know you've had incredibly a lot of information to digest this morning. So we just wanted to take another couple minutes of your time to update you on our affordable housing plan. You may recall that we invited Don Poland from Goldman and York to join us at our CPED meeting back in October, where we presented a draft of our plan. We have since revised our plan, primarily focused on the strategies section of our affordable housing plan. And you can find those changes on page 29, 30, 31, and 32. Actually, essentially pages 29 through 33 of the program. And a lot of what you will see in those strategies, we've been doing, and that's, we've been working on this program. It's, it's mandated by the state, required by the state that each municipality in the state develop a program. But we've, this council has been engaged in this process for a long time. And you can see that in programs like our affordable housing development program, where this council set aside $6 million in ARPA funds for the development of affordable housing. We put our money where our mouth is. So that's incorporated into our strategies. Everything in there are just suggestions, so they're not necessarily required for us to do. You hear words like inclusionary zoning, and this program doesn't mandate that, but it suggests what we've already been doing. Every time we have a development in town, we sit down with the development team and we talk about the importance of affordable housing to this community. And you can't go back and anything this council has approved, any project this council has approved over the last several years where affordable housing isn't built into that development. And that will continue. That will never change. And it's something that are, through that collaboration with our developers, they realize how important that is to the town of West Hartford. They embrace it and they work with us. And that's a lot to do with the hard work of our town planner, Todd DeMay, who's joining us this morning as well. Todd is the architect of this plan that's before you. So I didn't want to spend too much time on it, just wanted to highlight those sections of that section of the plan and give the council a little bit more time with those strategies and ensure that we are all comfortable with them. And we can come back again at our next meeting as well and finalize that document. But happy to pause there. Todd, I don't know if you had any additional comments you wanted to add on to mine. Certainly you have that opportunity to do so. But we happy to hear from the council, but also recognize you need a little bit more time with those strategies. And we will work with you over the next few weeks to educate and certainly incorporate any potential changes, suggestions that you would have into that. I can turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Does anyone have any questions, comments, feedback on the affordable housing? Ben?
Thank you. And thank you for the report. Appreciate all the work that's being done. Wasn't able to sort of identify where the changes were. We didn't get a sort of a redlined version. So I know so there were changes, but I at least as I read it, I didn't go back and look at the old one to sort of line by line. It would be helpful to see, where the changes actually were made. And I know, I mean, we certainly on inclusionary zoning had provided some feedback last time on that. And I'll just say for myself, I mean, I do remain concerned. I'd asked for data to guarantee that, any efforts we make in terms of requirements not inhibit development. And, we certainly have been having developers, through the special development district process add affordable housing as a sort of plus factor. But as I read this, the recommendation would include as of right building, which would add so not just through the regulatory approval, but even beyond that. And again, I asked a question whether people building apartments should have this extra obligation when we don't have that obligation for builders of other properties, including single family homes. So again, I do have continuing questions on that. And I'm not sure. I mean, it still seems to me like a pretty strong recommendation to do that. And again, I'm willing to talk about it, but I certainly need more data on that. It will be helpful to have that further discussion.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Winograd. And actually, as you look through some of the suggested language we have in there, there's nothing, and what we will do, I'll back up for a moment and just go back to your original comment. So we will highlight, redline the changes in this strategy section, forward it back out to the council and continue that conversation on that. But I think as we go through those changes, you will find that there isn't anything that ties us specifically to mandating any of the things that we've talked about. I mean, you'll see, tax abatement as one of the strategies. We've incorporated that in the past, but that doesn't, require us to do that in the future or mandate. Inclusionary zoning, for example, it will not require us to mandate a certain percentage of affordable housing, but certainly it's a tool we've been utilizing for years now. We will continue to utilize, and I think you'll appreciate some of the language that we have incorporated into the strategy section that does protect us at the same time. So we will highlight, redline those changes, get that back out to you, and we'll continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there
Thank
any
you.
other questions or comments from anyone? No? Okay. So do we have communications?
We do not, Madam Chair, and I know we have a small report by Director of Community Development. We will table that to the next meeting. I know we're an hour and 15 minutes in this morning. Appreciate your time. Unfortunately, on our end here, for anyone here at Town Hall, we have a fire drill that's just went off about 2 minutes ago. So we probably, it's not a planned fire drill, so I imagine we'll have to leave the building, and can hear the fire trucks coming now. So they won't be pleased that the town manager is still sitting in Town Hall at this point, but I know I have the back of the council, so thank you. I may need that.
Get out of there, Rick.
But thank you all for your time this morning. And back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you everyone for attending. Thanks for the presentations, and we'll be getting back together soon to go over both of these plans. So you guys get out of the building or you're going to get like a demerit or something. So
Thank you,
have
everyone.
a good day. Bye.
Take care.